Okay, guys, thanks for coming. This afternoon, we're going to talk to you guys a little bit about viticulture and sustainable viticulture in the UK. My name's Tim, this is Camilla, and we are from Vineworks. Firstly, we'll give you a bit of context into the wine growing industry. Then we'll go into the UK viticulture specifically. We'll discuss some global sustainability initiatives in viticulture and our UK-specific scheme, Sustainable Wines of Great Britain. And lastly, we will talk a little bit about what we do as a company, Vineworks, and round off with some questions. Next slide.
Sorry.
That's okay.
There we go.
So, yeah, bit of context. Viticulture is all about growing grapes. Generally, grapes have three end uses, those being table grapes, raisins, and wine grapes, if not beverages. A little bit about the crop: it's perennial. There's one big till at the beginning. We ripped down to about a meter, and it takes 3 years for a vine crop to establish. And the vines will last between 25 and 100 years. Normally, the vines need to be trellised and raised up above the ground, but that's in this country, and it depends on your end use, on how you actually do that and perform your plant husbandry. So a little bit about the viticulture in the UK.
So UK viticulture. First things first, can anyone give me a guess as to how many acres or hectares are currently planted in under vine in the UK? Yep. Yeah, not far off. We're currently sat at about 3,500 hectares at the moment, which, for context, this farm is a little over 1,000 hectares. So our entire industry is three of this farm. That's all. So it's tiny, but it's growing. It's growing exponentially. Over the last 10 years, planting has increased tenfold. It's growing at an incredibly rapid pace. We planted just over 500,000 vines this year. Just our company.
Just our company, and industry-wide, I think there are easily 1 million plants that went in.
Yeah. So we're sat at just over 700 vineyards at the moment. So if you think about per vineyard, when you look at sizes, you're looking pretty small. 100 odd wineries. So most people are not making their own wine at the moment either. And I've talked a bit about wine. That's because we don't grow grapes for consumption. We don't grow table grapes and we don't grow raisins. We just make wine here. So sparkling plus some red, white, rosé wine. UK viticulture, while it is growing really quickly, we are still a fairly marginal climate for viticulture. There are some pretty specific challenges that we face, spring frost being the biggest one. You may have seen pictures that maybe look beautiful of French vineyards lit up with candles. It's actually an incredibly practical frost protection method, but as you can imagine, incredibly manual to light a candle every 2 meters on a frost night, particularly given the fact that we had 25 frost nights in April this year in the UK. So, it's not easy.
It's going to be a seller's market for grapes this year.
Yeah. There are also other problems with sunlight hours and essentially just trying our hardest to get our grapes as ripe as possible and producing wine of good quality. So we're getting there. We're getting there, but it's a very, very new industry.
It's a new industry, and the end product, as you can imagine, is always going to dictate how we do it. So quality sparkling wine is really big in this country. We are rivaling champagne in wine shows and beating them. But that's not the only style that we make, as Camilla said. and we're pushing the boundaries. And really, winemaking is difficult, but it's where the raw material given you as a winemaker is poor, then you're in trouble. So the cutting edge is in the vineyard, and what we're doing is I don't know, proving the doubters wrong.
Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully, and dealing with everything that other farmers are dealing with, like labor cost, disease pressure, so crop protection, all those sorts of things. It's not unlike farming orchards. We use very similar equipment. Our tractors are narrow width. We use orchard sprayers for crop protection, if not tunnel sprayers if we can, which are great. We'll dive into sustainability in viticulture and what's sort of happening worldwide. In general, sustainable viticulture is built on 3 pillars. Those being sustainable viticulture is sensitive to social and cultural aspects. In UK, our labour laws are standard and good, but we consider that to be the absolute minimum. And so we look to encourage different cultures within the workforce and a UK viticulture workforce. And worldwide, this is what is happening. We're looking at training people to keep the longevity of that labour supply alive. And that's what people are doing worldwide. Secondly, sustainable viticulture seeks to maintain economic viability. Everyone feels the back pocket. So we can talk a little bit later on, just how much it costs to install a vineyard and to maintain it, and what the potential profits are, and what's sustainable economically. And lastly, we look into the environment, and that includes the vine. We're looking to maximize quantity at a desired quality without harming the vine, and we're looking to do the same thing without harming the environment. We're looking to protect it, and if we can, invest in it and go regenerative. So we'll be coming to you guys all for a little bit of knowledge, which is why we're here. There are various initiatives worldwide that are either confusing or very straightforward. Some of them are just generally best practice when it comes to viticulture, to actual regenerative efforts. So they cover the bases in lots of fields. We've got what's it called? Biodynamics and organic viticulture and conventional. Regenerative is really a new area, and that's what we're looking to get into big time. So after looking into those a little bit, we'll talk about our own scheme.
Okay, so I'm going to give you a bit of an intro into sustainable wines of Great Britain for any potential or current wine growers out there. So the scheme was launched in 2020, actually right before the pandemic began, so great timing. We represent at the moment around 90 growers, which, as I said earlier, there's only just over 700 vineyards in the UK, so it's a fair proportion at the moment. And it's quite exciting that we're at a stage in the industry where we can start to look at our own certification scheme, not just using other people's. As I said before, the UK industry is quite specific in its challenges. So having something that is really specific to us is, it's quite cool. It's really focusing on education and awareness at the moment, and trying to make sure that we are encouraging a culture of sustainability in the wine industry. Like we're new to this in the UK mostly, and trying to bring as many people along with us as people start their journeys into viticulture is quite important, at least to our industry. Sorry, I keep moving away from the microphone. It's based on a lot of criteria. all of the ones that you expect, really. So you're looking at everything from air quality to soil health to recycling and your carbon footprint. We actually use the farm carbon calculator as a benchmark. I don't know if any of you have heard of it. They are exhibiting here today, which is considered to be actually one of the best practice toolkits in the wine industry. There aren't many schemes that are calculating carbon footprint on a vineyard and winery basis at the moment. Generally, they calculate it for the entire industry. So actually looking at individuals and what they can do is super important, particularly as fundamentally we're growing a perennial plant, right? So like once you're planted, you're lasting 25 to 100 years. In terms of carbon sequestration, that's a pretty awesome opportunity. But key to that is really having a good understanding of that and knowing what steps, if any, you need to take to really maximize that.
And another cool thing about vineyards when it comes to establishing them is once we've done that big first till in the plant, we have a grass alleyway for the life of the vineyard. We look at anti-compaction. If you're on clay soils, that's a big deal. If you're in something like chalk or less stable soil, you want to, grass things down to avoid erosion. So it's something that we're trying to move away from one size fits all, because all the sites across the UK are different, and there are loads and loads of soil types over here, and we're still learning about what works best in certain situations. But the company that we've been working for has been going for near 15 years. So yeah, we have an opportunity to change along with our surroundings. Whether that's socio-economic or environmental. So at Vineworks, we embrace that change. We claim that we are viticulture, and like I said earlier, we're looking to take viticulture from sustainable to regenerative. So we're looking at all sorts of options and going forward. What Vineworks does essentially is that we establish vineyards, we manage vineyards, and we support both establishment and management with a strong retail department. With establishment, what happens is you think, okay, well, I've got a south-facing slope, and it's pretty sunny, and it's dry. Maybe the grass goes brown in the summer. Maybe this is a good place for me to plant some vines. We'll come out, we'll look at the site, and give it a first sort of look-see. And then if we think it's worth it, then we'll get into a feasibility study that is commissioned by yourself, and it's very thorough. It goes through all your climatic data, the history of that site, what was planted before, and what the potential is, and what varieties we think would be best to plant in your vineyard, and indeed which field we think is the best one to plant, because site selection is everything for a crop that's going to be lasting as long as it's going to last. So yeah, once we do that, we go away, we start to plan and order the vines, we plan the ground preparation that might need to go on, and then it comes to planting. Usually the season's from April till May, and we have a machine planter that plants vines. We also plant vineyards by hand. Camilla did quite a lot of that this year, our machine planter can also plant trees, so it's something that we could look at going forward. And once the vine's in the ground, that's where the management department comes in. And myself and Camilla, we're technical scouts. We go out into the vineyards, and we're checking for the growth stages of the vine, whether the furrow from planting is covered up, if there's any disease that we need to take note of. And we do all this service as a bespoke thing. So some vineyard managers will be working with 4 hectares of grapes and 400 hectares of apples. And so understandably, the vineyard is low down on the priority. And so we act as advisors, and we've got to sort of step back when they decide to make a decision. because we can't tell them what to do. With someone who's got 10 hectares of grapes and that's all they're doing, they come to us and we work with them. We work with their agronomist, and we're able to help guide them quite closely if that's what they want. We help people decide what equipment needs to go with their specific vineyard, because different soil types need different soil treatments throughout the year, or throughout the years rather. And yeah, for a young vineyard, we visit a few times, 7 times. As they get older, we visit more often, and we work directly with agronomists on crop protection to make sure that at the end of the day, all this effort, all this money, all this investment turns into something that you can sell and or drink at the end of the day. So we're doing that. We're the boots on the ground, and with the Sustainable Wines of Great Britain scheme, we offer the service from the get-go to get people certified and thinking the right way, because it is a mindset. As you know, I'm sure you're gathering from being at this show, people think differently, and we're trying to move away from old schools of thought, although learn from the past and make it work going forward. We partner with 2 tech companies, one called Track 365, which is a weather data app, and that helps us with the climatic data that's going on in the vineyard when frost events are happening, to warn you ahead of time. And we work with another company called Viticulture, who are also at this show, who help us to collect the data that we need to collect on the growth stages of the vines, and any disease that's going on, so that we can report that, get back to the client with that, so that they can action it, something to prevent against that happening. So we do everything. We're a one-stop shop, and we're really looking to the future in viticulture in the UK. There's a lot that can happen here. It's an exciting industry to be in, because we don't have to follow anybody else's rules. We can make them for ourselves. And at Vineworks, we'll help you in any way that we can if you are interested in working with us. So if you've got any questions, we would love to have a discussion with you. And we're going to be here for the rest of the evening, probably at the bar for a little bit, tasting the wares, and otherwise we'll be here tomorrow as well if you'd like to come and drop by and have a chat.
Particularly if you've never tried English wine, which maybe 1 or 2 of you in the room have never. We have a very small vineyard, and we'll be trying a little bit of our wine tomorrow. So
yeah. Anyway, any questions, anyone? Yes.
I've seen recently that areas like the Champagne region, a lot of producers are saying that they don't think sustainable wine production is viable, and so they can't see it happening. I was wondering how that mindset has changed, and why, if you have any thoughts as to why they think that it can't actually be.
So Champagne have actually very recently completely revamped their own sustainability scheme and started to talk about it more in terms of layers. And one of the things that they have decided is that fundamental to their vision of sustainability is carbon footprinting, and really digging into that and seeing how you can increase sequestration and decrease any carbon sinks. And they have given some pretty aggressive targets for their reductions in carbon footprint. So, as far as I know, coming from Champagne, they're looking to really focus on that side. That's their sustainable focus at the moment.
What's interesting about France is that their sustainability initiatives are very region specific. Camilla is getting her degree from the Loire Valley, and they're doing it quite differently. And you find the Loire Valley is full of more farmers, whereas Champagne is a brand. And so maybe that's why they're looking at the carbon neutral as their goal. But the way that they treat the land, Champagne compared to UK, is vastly different. They have entire hills, almost like post-World War II fields were expanded in this country. That's definitely what happened in Champagne. They've no hedges. The biodiversity is at the bare minimum. And so there's a lot they could do in the way of regeneration and introducing biodiversity, but they are restricted by how much land that they can plant. So the laws in France are slightly difficult to deal with in the sense that if I don't plant grapes here, I'm not going to make money from this 1 square meter, which is quite tough. Yeah. Any more?
Is there any... We've been talking about carbon sequestration quite a lot today.
Sure.
And there's money to be made out of sequestering carbon. Is there any alternative incomes from vineyards?
From vineyards? Well, we had a discussion with the gentleman in front of me here about grazing sheep in vineyards because of that grass cover crop. It's great. It cuts down on mowing. One has to be quite careful because you don't want the sheep to eat your vines, but there are ways around that. There's a special muzzle that we discussed that only allows them to graze but not to browse. So it's on a hinge. And it's been looked at in terms of cruelty. Horses get horse bags, sheep can have a muzzle. It's not a big thing. Companion cropping is quite a difficult thing. You could hardly plant sugar beets in the interrow, even though it would be lovely. It would help the water drain off because of that big taproot. It'd be so hard to harvest it. So it is an area that we're exploring, and trees is another one. Like I said, we could plant them, and you could look into the schemes that are available with the government as to, well, should I plant trees as well as the vines? We would recommend doing it on the land that's not good for vines and keep the good land for the vines.
Yeah, I'm just wondering whether the vines themselves are sequestering carbon. The government might be looking at whether they are, with this carbon credits available.
Oh, absolutely. We'd love that to be the case. You guys get paid to plant grapes. We get paid to plant grapes too.
We have been in conversation with Elms as to bringing viticulture in to the conversation at least. So things are happening, but yeah, precisely.
It is a tree. And you prune it back, and it grows back again, and it's a massive solar panel of photosynthesis.
Yeah, it's I think no, coming back to us being a very small industry, it's
our voice is not very loud at the moment in government, but there are a few lords and ladies who have vineyards, so they're doing what they can for us. Yes.
It strikes me a lot of vineyards, and I've only been to France a few times, but particularly in France, where I have been, they are very barren, and you said about the lack of diversity. A lot of vineyards, everything is sprayed off underneath,
Yeah.
and you've got the magical word, I'm never sure if I pronounce it right, terroir.
Terroir.
Yeah.
But I always think that actually with the introduction and inclusion of more biodiversity into a vineyard, and that's in vineyards of cover crops, so clovers and things like that on the roads, eating every other road unmowed, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
The start, and actually your vines are going to take more of the actual area than just simply this brown.
100%. I mean, that's what sets us apart as UK viticulture, is that grass swath underneath the vines. We do under vine treatments. You've got to be careful that weeds don't grow up into your vines. So there are ways to do that without herbicide, which we must employ. You can mow. You've got special mowers that can go around the vine trunks without harming them. So I don't know. We are different, and we're better than some of the people in the developed wine countries. Yeah,
I agree, and we agree with that. And I've got quite a good example of exactly what you're saying, and it is really just me agreeing with the problem. So in Austria, I came across a winemaker who grew everything biodynamically, would only cultivate or do any work in the vineyard by hand or by horse. But due to the his wines quite often ended up lower alcohol because of the essentially the lack of spraying. They were losing some levels of ripeness in their grapes. But the person next door to him who was spraying everything, we'll talk about drift as an aside, but spraying everything, but was reaching these levels of alcohol and planting specific varieties which might not have even been indigenous in the first place to this area of Austria. One of them fell within the appellation and one of them didn't. And it was the biodynamic farmer that didn't, despite the fact his way of thinking and his way of farming, for me personally, represents terroir in far more of a way than the farmer next door, who really could be growing the exact same plant anywhere. And,
Anywhere in the world, yeah.
And producing wine that tasted very similar.
Yeah.
I think it is a problem. But in the UK, we're not bad at least under vine care. So.
Well, certainly, I mean, if you talk about under vine, but the expression of terroir in this country, like I said, there are a lot of different soil types, and there are a lot of little mesoclimates. We're talking about finding your sun trap, but no one sun trap is the same as another. And if you're looking at making smaller batches of wine, there's a lot that you can do to say, deep as this part of the hill tastes different from that part of the hill, and that's terroir. And so, you know, there's a lot of scope within the UK, because there are a lot of places with little fields, to produce something with a unique experience for the consumer. Anyone else? Okay, well, thank you very much. Oh, yeah, go ahead. Certainly. Yeah, we promote the planting of them. They've been a lot developed over, I don't know, well, I've said the last century. A lot of disease-resistant varieties were developed. And there are more being developed all the time. I don't know. It depends on your site and what you want to do. If you want to make red wine, we'll look for a red grape that we can ripen here, and that's, you know, sometimes they're a bit harder to pronounce. They've got different names, and they're not the ones that you're used to seeing on the shelf. But there are some really palatable wines that can be made using disease-resistant varieties. For example, you know, we planted a vineyard in Scotland. We need something that's bomb-proof up there because of how much it's going to rain. I mean, England in general, it rains here, I've discovered, quite frequently. So, yeah, well, actually, that's a funny thought, because the rainfall here is not that much higher, if not, you know, from Champagne or, you know, regions across the world, Luxembourg or, you know, many other places. We actually have lower rainfall here, but it's the timing of that rainfall. And when it gets cold here is when we're trying to ripen our fruit as much as we can. So the harvest and early ripening varieties are another thing that we'd look at, not just disease-resistant varieties. And again, what's best for your specific site?
I think also disease-resistant varieties used to have quite a bad reputation, particularly in terms of wine quality. You might be able to grow them, but they might not taste very nice. But some of the more progressed disease-resistant varieties are definitely making quality wine and stuff that is a lot more palatable than previously. So.
I slagged winemakers before. My passport actually says winemaker in it. So winemaking has improved, you know, over the last few years, and there's a lot that can be done with your selection of your yeast and things like that. But we're not winemakers at Vineworks, although we do have some wine. So we hope you come and taste it. Thank you.